Hi, I'm Jack Brewer. I'm the Head of Settlement Performance at Stark. I've been with Stark for 9 years and I have the overarching responsibility for settlement performance, which is the industry performance standard that suppliers need to adhere to.
Hello, my name is James Murphy. I'm the Head of Policy and Regulation at Stark. I've been here for 11 years now. I've been involved with MHHS for about 6 years now already, and looks like another 5 years at least to go.
Market-wide is all about data and having good actual data for customers' consumption and for supplier and settlement. So, all of these traditional dumb meters that are out there, we want to work with our customers and suppliers to get them exchanged for working AMRs so that we're getting actual data on a daily basis so that customers can see their data online and do energy management. And suppliers get their data for settlement, which is going to become much trickier come market-wide.
It is really critical for the end consumer to have visibility of that data, particularly in market-wide half-hourly, where the focus shifts a lot more to when you're consuming energy rather than simply how much. So not having access and visibility of that data every day could have quite significant impacts in an MHHS settled world for end customers. Because it ties into time of use tariffs and everything like that, which will become a lot more commonplace over time, potentially even replacing kind of your standard fixed tariffs. From an industry perspective, so market-wide half-hourly settlement program is right in the middle of the system integration testing phase, which is a testing phase for the fastest movers who could design and build their systems for MHHS fastest. I think there's probably a while to go in that phase still, and we are on the cusp of a replan actually within the program. Once that testing phase concludes, then you move to the migration phase when meters physically move from legacy current arrangements to market-wide half-hourly TOM, target operating model.
Market-wide changes everything for us sort of in our operations department, because we're moving from a world that is half-hourly and non-half-hourly to just one segment, and that's hundreds, thousands of meters that we're appointed to today in the non-half-hourly world that are going to be settled half-hourly post MHHS. So, from our point of view, we're getting everything ready to be able to accommodate that change, and we're making really good progress there with sort of internal structure and console development to allow our guys who do the day job, the data collection, the data validation, to be able to do that job in market-wide half-hourly.
So system integration testing is a voluntary thing, and not all existing supplier agents put themselves forward for SIT. The benefit of being a participant in SIT is that you qualify for MHHS before those who don't participate in SIT. So you're ready to start supporting migration from the earliest point possible. Even within SIT, there's a concept of the minimum viable cohort, which basically takes the 2 fastest moving cohorts within SIT and then fast tracks them to complete the testing and qualify ahead of the other people within SIT. And the cohort that Stark is in is one of those 2 that are forming part of the MVC. So we are very well positioned to qualify first and support suppliers as soon as possible.
We're going to be in a position where we're 1 or 2 cohorts that will be in the position to start helping suppliers months earlier than anybody else, which puts us in a great position to help suppliers with their data cleanse activities. So one of the things that needs to happen before an MPAN can go through MHHS migration is a data cleanse. So all of the data flows need to be reviewed, and there's certain field items in those data flows that need to be populated and cleansed, basically reviewing the entire health of a supplier's portfolio. And we've already started to map out exactly what it is that needs to be cleansed and started to have those initial conversations with suppliers. So we're going to be able to start that activity earlier than most. We're going to be able to start supporting suppliers as soon as a supplier is ready to migrate to market-wide. We're going to be ready, so there's going to be no delay from our side. And we've already mapped out what suppliers are going through market-wide half-hourly migration at what stage, and made sure that we've got the necessary resource allocation to help deliver on that swiftly and to the best standards.
There are 5 agent roles in market-wide half-hourly settlement.
So you've got ADS, SDS, which is the data services. You've got MSS and MSA, which is the metering side, which we are qualifying for through Start Connect. And then you've got UMSDS, which is the unmetered segment of market-wide half-hourly, which we are now really pleased that we're able to offer all 5 of those as parts of market-wide through the acquisition of Tim Huckin, which allows us to be able to do all services.
Yeah, I think expanding on that a little bit as well, I think we might be the only agent who fills all those roles, but then also operates as an IDNO, so performs the kind of license distribution role, the registration role, and the UMSO, unmetered supply system operator role as well. So yeah, I can't actually think of any other agents who do basically everything on the MHHS target operating model.
In today's world, you have half-hourly and non-half-hourly settlement, and suppliers need to be providing actual data into settlement at certain performance levels at different settlement runs depending on the measurement class. So in half-hourly today, the performance standard is 99% actual data at SF for measurement class C and R1 for measurement class E and G. And SF is currently 16 working days and R1 is 39 working days. In post MHHS world, the timeline is reducing significantly. So SF goes from 16 working days to 7 working days. And the standard that suppliers are going to be targeted to hit is going from 99% to 100%. So what that means is more actual data needs to be put into settlement sooner. So that means that suppliers need to improve on their current performance because industry is underperforming at the moment in today's world. It's going to become even more tricky. Market-wide world. It's really important that suppliers are working their portfolios, reducing the reliance on manual data collection. The industry is over-reliant on manual data collection. We need to move away from that. We need to move towards more working AMR comms, day plus one data delivery, so that we're obtaining at least 95%. This is something we've been working towards internally. This is not an industry target, but we strongly believe the only way suppliers can hit settlement performance standards in today's world is if they are performing 95% at day plus one. And industry's way off that. So 95% day plus one is what we need to strive to achieve. And the way we're going to do that is by getting more meters working remotely, using our talented MOP team to schedule jobs quicker, prioritising the right sites. Everything that we do in Stark is based around consumption. So when we're looking at a supplier's portfolio, we are allocating a priority to every site. So that could be anything from priority 1 through to priority 5. Priority 1 being your high consumers, and they get prioritised and scheduled sooner so that the risk to settlement is mitigated. And all of that, plus many more things that are going on in the background, all of that contributes towards this 95% day plus one, which then enables us to bridge that gap, the remaining gap, through manual data collection to hit the settlement performance standards. So suppliers are going to want to, the risk of suppliers going into EFR is going to be much greater in market-wide because of the more challenging settlement performance standards. So suppliers are going to want to partner with agents who have a history of being able to deliver high quality data, such as ourselves. So that's the new settlement timeline. Obviously, the current non-half hourly world is migrating to half hourly as well, so we'll be settled in the same way. In today's world, non-half hourly is monitored at the final reconciliation run, RF, which is 14 months today, and in market-wide that's moving to 4 months. So that's impacted as well, because if there's any data corrections that need to happen, got a far shorter period to get that done. Otherwise you're falling into trading dispute territory, which is a really difficult territory to be in and can cost suppliers significant sums of money to have data corrected that's gone beyond RF.
and to fix faults faster from a kind of metering perspective as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, from a metering perspective, we're going to have to change the way that we operate, because in today's world, if a meter stops communicating, generally a D1 is raised at day +3, which is fine in today's world because you've got 16 days to get out of sight, get the fault corrected, or get some data manually in the interim. But when the timeline's now reducing to 7 working days, if you're not raising a D1 until day +3, that's almost half of the time gone. And so we're going to have to become more dynamic in the way that we're addressing and fixing faults, whilst continuing to focus on those high consuming sites for suppliers, the ones that are really going to impact their performance if they're about to hit.
Yeah, just going back to the settlement performance standards and targets that suppliers have in today's world. They do have these targets, but I would say the incentives to hit them at the moment are actually pretty weak. There's a supplier charging regime that sits behind those performance standards. And at the moment, it's a sort of pound or pence per megawatt hour of estimation below the applicable standard. So taking the example of half-hourly Class C, something like 13 pence per megawatt hour of estimation below 99% at SF, and then £1.43 at R1. And those are figures that were, as far as I know, were kind of plucked out of the air 20 years ago and written into the BSc and never really changed. And they're sort of at a level at the moment where most suppliers can kind of just ignore them and don't feel incentivized enough to improve their performance to reduce those charges. There's also another aspect of ineffectiveness within the current setup around the redistribution of those charges. So all of those charges go into a pot that Elexon essentially administers. And because they're not for profit, they can't really do anything with that money, and it has to go back out to trading parties under the BSc. And the way that redistribution works at the moment is it goes to non-half-hourly suppliers based on their market share. So what that means is you could have a supplier who is significantly underperforming against those settlement performance targets, but then actually receiving a credit on their monthly charges bill because they've got a massive non-half-hourly domestic portfolio, which seems a little bit unfair, potentially, and isn't really that effective at driving the kind of behaviors that we want to see in a market-wide half-hourly world, where actual data needs to be maximized as much as possible to achieve the benefits that Ofgem outlined in their business case. So that leads on to some pretty significant changes under MHHS. That 99% actual data target is increasing to 100%. So it was kind of felt that if you put 99% in the BSc, people are going to try and hit that and then do nothing after they reach it. So it's felt suppliers should be striving to get all of their data as actuals into the settlement machinery. What that means is charges are then applied to entire non-actual or estimated volumes. So in today's world, charges are only applied to the estimated volumes below the standard, whereas in MHHS, they'll apply to entire estimated volumes. The rate of the charge is no longer a fixed thing. It now becomes variable. So the charge that will be used is a fraction of the live credit assessment price. The credit assessment price essentially tracks the forward-looking electricity prices in the market, and the fraction of it that's used is determined by the overall proportion of estimation within a given segment. So if in the advanced segment the overall performance was 95% actual and 5% estimated, the rate of charge would be 5% of the live credit assessment price. So if that was £80 per megawatt hour, then you're looking at a £4 per megawatt hour charge. That is then applied to the total estimated volumes. Now, the intention of that is to create this incentive for suppliers to put as much actual data as possible into settlement. And then the sort of double incentive that leads on from that are changes to the way that those charges are redistributed. So no longer will they be redistributed based solely on your non-half-hourly market share. Instead, they will be redistributed based on the amount of actual volume you put into overall actual volumes. So if a supplier's actual volumes were 10% of overall actual volumes, then they would get 10% of that entire pot back. In MHHS, there is a double incentive to perform well. First, to minimize supplier charges, and then second, to maximize the redistribution element.
It's important to note that those charges that supplier could be faced with or rebate that they would receive is quite significant. We're sort of talking hundreds of thousands of pounds potentially for a large supplier that's performing 1% above industry and is performing well with a large actual percentage of actual data going into settlement. So yeah, it's a real incentive, I think, much better than the old model, and incentivize suppliers to perform well, which will hopefully just keep driving that industry average higher to at some point
stabilize at an efficient level.
Yeah. So to summarise then, there are settlement performance standards today that suppliers need to adhere to. In the market-wide world, these settlement performance standards are going to become tougher, and suppliers are going to have to hit those standards in a much shorter frame of time as well. So it's almost a double whammy. It's going to be really important for suppliers to partner with agents that have a history of performing well versus industry performance to deliver those settlement performance standards for them.
Yeah, and the kind of accompanying piece to that is the supplier charges regime that kind of underpins performance standards is changing as well. So suppliers will be incentivized to perform as well as they can to reduce their exposure to those charges and maximize the amount that they can potentially get back through redistribution. The performance standards and supplier charges apply to all segments under MHHS, so advanced, smart and unmetered. The suppliers will be measured separately against each segment, essentially. So we get a separate set of reports for each segment and separate set of charges for each segment, but the way that those charges are calculated and performance measured is essentially the same. I guess with the smart segment, you've got the slight quirk of traditional meters, dumb meters being part of that segment as well. Now, of course, expecting a supplier to read a traditional meter within 7 working days for the new SF run is quite unreasonable. So it looks like those are potentially going to be excluded from performance and charge calculations for the SF run at least, but will be included at the RF run.
Which, as a reminder, is reducing from 14 months to 4 months. So it means we're going to need to attend site to take manual reads more regularly. We partner with agents that are able to provide that service.
I guess in today's world, trad meters is kind of like 8-month, 9-month kind of cadence, and then, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so in today's world, we go out and get a read once an MPAN hits the R3 settlement run, which is 7 months before RF. So it gives us a good 7 months to get out to site and get a manual read, possibly make a re-attempt if that first attempt is unsuccessful. It's our best way of mitigating settlement performance impact and making sure that we're sending a reading across to the supplier so that they can build a customer to.
And then under MHHS, with the reduced settlement timetable, those trad meters will probably have to be read quarterly. Yeah.
I'd imagine quarterly. They need to be read every 4 months to satisfy the RF run. Otherwise, you run into all sorts of complications with trading disputes and things like that. So quarterly seems logical.
I guess the other thing I would say on the smart segment, obviously we've talked about trad meters a lot there, but there's obviously SMETS meters, which are supported by this centralized monopoly called the Data Communications Company, who handle kind of access control and data retrieval from SMETS meters. Suppliers can access that infrastructure themselves through their existing kind of connection to the DCC, but alternatively, there's a new user role being created called Meter Data Retriever, which will allow independent organizations like Stark to do that for and on behalf of suppliers who may not want to go through the effort and work of developing their systems to ingest that level of half-hourly daily data from the DCC. And the way that plays into the sort of performance standards and charges is if Stark is appointed as the Smart Data Service and MDR, then we can provide more assurances of reducing exposure to charges because we're in control of the end-to-end retrieval and processing service. If we have to rely on an external party to provide us with the data, then there are less assurances that we can provide.
our preference is AMR. We find them cheaper for supplier and more reliable source of data. But we do support suppliers that opt for the SMETS meter instead. We have a few suppliers at the moment that we are doing SMETS projects for in the non-domestic world. So yes, we fully support SMETS meters, and as James mentioned earlier, in market wide we are qualifying for the MDR role to enable us to make sure that we're attaining that data directly from the DCC ourselves, so that we can serve that up for supplier.
I would expand a little bit and say, in a lot of cases, suppliers are a bit restricted sometimes in what they can offer around meter types. So like you said, for domestic customers, they have to offer a SMETS meter. For micro businesses, they have to offer a SMETS meter. But for any non-micro business customers that fall within scope of the smart meter rollout, they are able to offer a choice between AMR or smart to those customers. And we can support suppliers in whatever method they choose to install.
Suppliers have asked in the past for advice on whether they should adopt the AMR or the SMETS meter. Suppliers view the SMETS meter as a cheaper alternative, but when you take into consideration things such as DCC costs, actually we did a piece on it a while ago, and we worked out that the AMR is the cheaper option. As I said, I also find it the more reliable option, and we're communicating with that meter directly and attaining the data ourselves rather than relying on a third party, the DCC, which the data all gets pushed into, and then pulling it from there. So at the start, we've developed all our own software, our own dialing software. We like to be in control of what we're doing. So, being able to dial into the meters ourselves and retrieve that data, that's always our preference. And we developed best-in-class software to help us do that and dial all AMR meter types that are currently out there and approved by Alexon.
I think the DCC charges per MPAN or something like £20 per annum per MPAN. If you kind of look at their charging statements and then figure out what a per MPAN cost is, it's basically £20 per annum per MPAN on top of all the other metering costs that exist normally. So there's that additional cost for SMETS meters.
There's many different agents. Each agent can dial different meter types. Some can support some and not others, and vice versa. We can support every approved AMR meter type, which means we can remotely communicate with every meter type. The risk of supplier appointing an agent that doesn't support a particular meter type is that meter gets essentially dumbed down. Essentially, it's treated as a dumb meter because they can't communicate with it, and the comms details end up just getting lost. We can support that. One example is the Emlite meter, which has been around since 2020. It got brought into the UK market to replace the Elster when Honeywell announced its exit from the UK market. And it's a very capable meter, half-hourly and non-half-hourly AMR meter, CT and whole current, so very versatile, stores a lot of data. We adopted it straight away. We built the protocol ourselves, as we do with all of our software. And that meant from the day that Emlite started getting installed by our MOP, we were able to communicate with that meter and retrieve data. The problem is there are agents out there now who are still unable to support that meter. So if we lose the appointment and it moves away from us, there is a chance that meter will get dumbed down. And then if the comms details get lost down the line, you might see that in the wrong segment in market-wide half-hourly, and that meter becomes reliant on manual data collection when it's a perfectly good communicating meter.
It's not in anyone's interest really for that to happen at all, is it? DCs are able to go through that process to be able to communicate with the meter. It's fair and open, and the manufacturer has to make the kind of protocols available for people to do that.
As a DCDA, we work with all meter operators, third-party meter operators and our own. But we do work best where we're appointing both the DCDA and the MOP for obvious reasons. We are one company, we share systems, we share information, which enables us to deliver the best service for our suppliers. So although yes, we do work with all MOPs, I have regular operational engagement calls with all meter operators. You have to, because 40% of our portfolio is with other ops. So you need to have that engagement with them in order to sustain settlement performance as well. But yeah, I repeat, where we're appointed both DC, DA and MOP, we're able to prove that we do perform better. We do perform better than when we're not the MOP, and we do perform better than the industry as a whole. I continually report on sort of industry performance versus our own, and we consistently perform at least 1% above industry performance, which, you know, is a good gauge for market-wide half-hourly. We're doing something right. Again, loops in with the supplier charges model too. Suppliers are incentivised to perform above industry average, and we have a proven track record of doing so.
You're far better than average, Jack, I think is what he's saying.
Slightly above average. We're talking about still talking about data. It's our development team. You know, we've probably got one of the biggest, I mean, I don't know this as a fact, but we've probably got one of the biggest development teams out there in this industry, because at our core, we always were a software company before we got into energy. And so we've got 65-ish employees in our technology team. So everything's developed in-house, from our sort of dial software through to the sort of day-to-day applications that our teams use to do the day job, which means it's highly adaptable. We can adapt quickly. It's highly scalable.
It means we're masters of our own destiny in a way, because we've got the IP in-house that we can kind of control and react to things quicker and faster.
Our collection's semi-automated, so it reduces the need for headcount. Something I like to always say is, when I started at Stark 9 years ago, there was around 30 members of our data collection ops team. And at the time, we looked after about 50,000 metering points. And today, we still have around 30 FTE in that ops team, but we look after around 300,000. So that just shows you how we've developed our software over the years, how we've dealt with growth without needing to just throw extra bodies at it. Of course, we appreciate with market-wide, with everything going half-hourly, we will need additional resource. We are planning for that at this moment. We're confident that actually we'll be able to build these really intelligent systems, that a lot of the job is automated, and the teams will only be looking at what's gone wrong and not what's gone right.
Something recently been saying to suppliers is like sharing their migration plans with us a bit more to help us, you know, efficiently plan resource and stuff. It's easy for a supplier to forget that as an agent we work with so many other suppliers who might all want to be doing activity on the same day. So when they're making their submissions to the program about when they're migrating certain MPANs, it'd be helpful to share it with us.
It's a partnership, a supplier-agent relationship. It's not one way. So yes, of course, we're here to help them make sure they hit their performance standards, but at the end of the day, they got to work with us as well. So, you know, my team being sort of like the guys on the front line with suppliers, we're reaching out to all the suppliers at the moment to gauge when they're going through migration, you know, how far along they are in their development, what do they personally see as the challenges that they're going to be faced, and try and get a clear picture of what their approach is so that we can support them in the best way possible. One of those is to understand when they're going through migration so that we can start mapping out from our side how we can support them with that and make sure that their portfolios are as healthy as possible when they do undergo migration, so that they can hit the settlement performance standards that we discussed earlier on. Is making sure, you know, working now to get their portfolios as healthy as possible, because if they go through market wide with 80% AMR, 20% done, then they're going to find it really difficult to hit their settlement performance standards. So it's a case of reviewing the portfolio, working with the supplier and with our colleagues in Stark Connect to hash out a plan on how we're going to get working AMRs installed across the supplier's portfolio, so that from the day of migration, we're receiving day plus one data, which is obviously beneficial for both customer and supplier.
Addressing the state of their metering portfolio, kind of improving the health of it as much as they can to maximize actual data before we go into the migration period. Second, being open and kind of transparent with the agents they work with on what their plans are for MHHS. So when they intend to qualify, what their migration plan is, sharing that with each agent to make sure that they're on board as well. And third, I guess being kind of subscribed to all of the market-wide half-hourly program work groups and mailing lists and newsletters to make sure that they're fully kind of up to date with all the changes that are happening.
And a fourth one, I guess, choosing, thinking about who they're going to partner with so that they can deliver on this, because it's the biggest change to the industry since the late 90s. It's going to be huge. It's not going to be pretty. It's going to be quite complicated. So, and suppliers can't do it without their agents, and agents can't do it without suppliers. It goes both ways, but suppliers should really be thinking about who they partner with to provide all the functions mentioned, all the agent services mentioned. Who has a proven track record of being able to deliver good performance, being able to deliver AMR projects, and making that decision.